morning, or afternoon, or evening, no matter where you are in the world. Welcome to Authenticate with Alicia Partee. I'm so glad you're tuning in today, and I'm going to take you on a journey. We're going to talk to expats from the African diaspora around the world, and we're going to talk about their experiences, the culture, living abroad, and we're going to get tips and resources. And hopefully, this encourages you, if you're not already, to travel, study, and live abroad. But I'm so excited today. Our guest today is, I'm going to say your name right, Asha.
Asha Farrah.
Asha Farrah. I didn't want to mess it up. Man, I was thinking too hard on that one. Super excited. And actually, she and I had started talking prior to us even starting the podcast. And as she got into it, I was like, oh, this is too much. This is too juicy. Let's hit record and get going. So before we literally jump into just talking and having an organic conversation, I would really like to hear a little bit about you, how you kind of ended up in Mexico, just a little summary. And then also, when you heard the name of my company, Authenticate, what came to mind?
Sure. So I want to say thank you so much for having me and extending this conversation for me today. My name is Asha Farrah, as you mentioned. I'm currently an expat in beautiful Santiago de Queretaro, Mexico. I moved here in about 2021, mid-pandemic. Initially, I always wanted to live abroad. I've been fortunate to be able to travel all over the world. But Mexico was one of those places that was so rich in culture. It had so much that it offers that it always called me back. So I got my first passport stamp in Mexico when I was in college during spring break. I was married in Mexico, and now I'm an expat in Mexico. So I feel like Mexico and I have a very unique relationship.
Yeah, that is amazing. And Authenticate,
Yes.
what did that sound? When you heard that, what did you think?
Absolutely. So when I heard that, first of all, it was not a term that I heard before. So I love that. But it actually made me think about being authentically you and integrating into wherever you go. So for
Mhm,
me, that happens to be the new culture, the new country that I'm experiencing.
mhm,
But it
mhm.
also reminds me that at all times, I still need to be me. I'm very open to integrating. I'm new cultures, new food, new experiences, but I'm going to be authentically me and I'm going to bring a piece of me inside of where I go.
I think you've embodied what that term. That is a term that I came up with when I was
I
living in.
love it.
Yeah. So thank you, Asha. I'm so excited to get going with you. So, what inspired you to pursue a life abroad and even relocate to Mexico? Where did that come from?
Yeah, I think, for me, I was fortunate, as I said earlier, I've been able to travel to almost 30 countries now. And I think when you start traveling abroad, you're seeing things outside of your comfort zone, right? So
Mhm.
you realize that the status quo for you, the way you live, the things that you eat, the experiences that you have, the way you hang out with your friends on the weekends, the holidays that you have, the festivals, everything. When you start traveling, you see a different way of life. And for
Mhm.
me, it opened my eyes and it just made me so curious.
Yeah.
It made me extremely curious. And as I mentioned, traveling to Mexico, I've been traveling to Mexico on and off for 15 years,
Mhm.
in different places in Mexico. So not just like the Cancuns, the Playa del
Mhm.
Carmen's, but exploring a little bit more in Mexico. And I realized, wow, this country has so much to offer. There's so many lessons here for me. And so when I realized that the quality of life is so high here, that was really the biggest indicator for me to go. Because
Mhm.
for me, I realized that I desire a high quality of life. And that
Mhm.
means something different for everyone. But I noticed that when I was in Mexico, I noticed the quality of life felt rich.
Wow. I
Yeah.
love that. I love that. I want to. Okay, I won't go there yet. I'm gonna. No, wait. How old were you? You said you got your passport when you were in high school?
No, I came on like a spring break trip in college to
In
Mexico.
college.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I might have been 19, 20. And I did the typical spring break in Cancun. But even that was like the first wake up, like, oh, wow, this country is really beautiful. I think a
Uh-huh.
lot of times Mexico is primarily shown for its beaches. But I
Mhm.
actually was able to experience Chichen Itza. So I was able to see an ancient civilization site and
Wow.
learn about the Maya culture. And that for me, it was over. It was like, wait a second.
That is
They don't talk enough about the history
mm,
um, that correlates to Mexico. And I feel like it was so interesting in
Yeah.
how they continue the way of lives in many of the different cultures here. So it was just enough for me to be like, okay, but that was still 19-year-old me, So it was
Yeah.
like, okay, this is cool, interested, but let me run back to the beaches. But,
Yeah.
again, Mexico kept calling me back. And the
I
more and more I learned, I was like, okay, I'm hooked.
Yeah. The reason I really love what you're saying is because sometimes, especially being in America, we miss out on a lot of the world stories because we don't travel. And I mean, traveling abroad from the different countries that I've been to, I'm amazed of the history. I mean, from
Correct.
Ethiopia, and we're in it. When you go abroad or you go to Spain and you see people that look like us in the, here in America in a lot of the churches and stuff, they don't look like us when they put up statues and things. But I mean, you hear the history and how we are embedded, and I just love that. And so I encourage you. But there are some things when being an expat, and sometimes, we use that word loosely. I kind of want to say that because for you and me, when I moved to Norway, I was, you can put it under expat, but I was an immigrant. I was going to
Yeah.
stay there for the rest of my life, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, so I wasn't an expat. I didn't go for a job. I followed my husband, but he took a permanent job there in
Okay.
Norway, and things like that. And so, you guys, there are so many ways to move abroad. So we're saying expat because that's a familiar word, but there are many different ways you can live abroad. I want to say that. But could you describe some of the
I
legit?
agree. I
Yes.
agree with you. And one little thing I want to piggyback off what you said
Mhm.
and encourage your listeners. I
Yeah.
love what you said that we're everywhere. So
Mhm.
I just want to encourage listeners, sometimes you think of a country and maybe you say, I'm not reflected in that country. That's what the
Mhm.
media has shown. Please
Yes.
don't think that. I've
Mhm.
gone to Spain and you learn about the Moor civilization. So
Yes.
I really encourage you to explore everywhere. I had to hit on that point because that's so true.
It's so true.
Don't limit yourself.
Don't limit, from Spain to Germany to
Yep.
Costa Rica to
Yes. We're
everywhere.
everywhere.
And
100%.
do you know when I moved to Norway, and you guys, when I moved there, one of my first friends was an African American
Hmm.
who was from a diplomat to a military. But I was shocked at the number of us. I'm like, here I am in Scandinavia with
Hmm.
people with and I walk out and I see them.
Yep.
It's pretty amazing. Um,
Yeah.
when you're thinking about, and I'm going to include traveling and moving abroad, what are some of the logistical challenges when relocating, and also challenges, but I almost want to say, what are some things to consider? They're not really
Yeah,
challenges.
and opportunities.
Yes, I mean,
I think that's a wonderful question, and that speaks to probably what we'll discuss later. My company,
mhm,
Expat Dreamers, I
yes,
really focus on the logistical consideration. So I'm glad you asked that when moving abroad. So first things first, you want to establish: is there a different language in the country that you're going to? Because communication is key. If you
mhm,
have all your ducks in the row, but you cannot communicate with the population, you're doing yourself a disservice, and you're not really going to thrive there.
mhm,
So if you're considering moving to a country that primarily speaks French, do yourself the service and start learning French ahead of time. For me, I live in Mexico. It's very important to learn Spanish,
mhm,
not because, oh, okay, I'm going to get a better deal. It's a respect and a sign of respect for the culture. And that's
mhm,
what I tell my clients right off the bat. When you're moving somewhere and you're not from there, you want to show respect to the culture. That's
mhm,
very, very important.
mhm,
So the first logistical step would be learning the language.
mhm,
And that's an opportunity for you, right? Because again, many of us coming from America, I'm going to be very transparent, speak
mhm.
one language and
Yep,
barely speak that well.
yep,
Okay.
for real.
And so to me, I looked at it as an opportunity. I didn't look at it as a challenge to have to, like, oh, I have to speak this other language every day. No, that's great. Now I'm bilingual.
Yes.
So I encourage you to see challenges as opportunities when moving abroad.
Mhm,
Another thing that I would say, before you pack your bags, put your stuff in the suitcase, are you able to legally move there? Are you able to legally move to this country?
yeah.
There's so many clients that I speak with that just feel like, oh, Mexico's down the street from the US. I can
Mm,
just I can just pack my bags and show up.
yeah.
No.
Yeah. No.
There is a process. There is
Mhm,
a visa process. So
mhm,
I encourage you to Google the Mexican consulate in your respective state and
mhm,
check out requirements necessary to move. Make
Yeah.
sure that you meet the requirements. That's a very, very big step because,
Yeah.
again, I keep saying the same thing. When you move here, you want to thrive here.
Yes.
And you
Yeah.
can't thrive here if you have not considered the logistics.
Yes.
So, those are the biggest things I would say. The language is very important in understanding if you need a visa to move there. And
Yes.
the third one I'll give you to your listeners are, what is your budget? Just because you hear, maybe you think Latin America is cheaper, you think South America is cheaper. This is 2023.
Hmm.
Really understand what the cost of living is for where you're moving and
Yeah.
establish a budget. And
Absolutely.
familiarize yourself with the currency. That's another
Yes.
tidbit. For
Yeah.
Mexico, for example, we operate on a floating currency.
Hmm.
Floating means today it could be this, tomorrow it could be that.
What prompted you to create Mexpat Dreamers, and how does it help aspiring travelers? I don't know. Maybe it doesn't help travelers. Maybe
Yeah,
it's just
it's both
yeah. Tell us.
aspiring expats and aspiring travelers. So
Okay.
for me, I created Expat Dreamers to empower aspiring travelers, expats to really consider the logistical considerations so that they can thrive fully when they get here. It's
Hmm.
really, for me, creating this business, I encourage my clients to be intentional about every aspect of their life they want to create.
Hmm.
Because really, when you think about it, throughout our lives, most of the places we've lived because our family has lived there, because maybe we have a job set up there, we went to college there, there wasn't much intentionality around it. So when
Hmm.
I was making this journey, I wanted to be intentional about everything. I wanted to be intentional about the weather that I woke up to every day, the landscape that I look out my window and see, the food that I ate, every little thing so I could totally thrive and enjoy my life.
Yeah.
So that's really what makes Pat Dreamers is about. If we look at the logistical considerations first,
Hmm.
visa, budget, desired location. Mexico is a very big country. People don't
Hmm.
realize that.
Hmm.
And so, to answer your second question, the reason why I really created this company is because I noticed that, number one, there was no blueprint for people who look like us for moving abroad. Okay. So, there's nothing that tells us that. And so, a lot of people start using social media, and
Hmm.
social media is not real.
Yeah.
Social media is a reflection of people's best photos, it's a
Yes.
highlight reel.
Yes.
So when you see these places, for example, you say, "Oh man, Cancun's so beautiful. Oh man, I want to go to Cabo." Can you
Hmm.
live in the desert? Have you considered, could you live in the desert?
Mm.
Is that the weather for you?
Mhm.
You know
Right.
what I mean? You really have to consider your everyday living considerations,
Yeah.
okay? Do you
Hmm.
have asthma? Can you live in a certain climate? How is
Hmm.
the school system? Do you have health issues? Certain
Yes.
cities have healthcare options. These
Mhm.
are the things that I delve in with my clients. So I remove the social media of it all and we get real.
That is real. I have to tell you, when I moved abroad, I Googled, I did so many things to research the country and so much. And what I saw most were Facebook groups, Americans here,
Hmm.
Americans there, and a couple things. I did appreciate it, and they did have some. There were some times I actually used the Facebook groups to get questions answered much faster. But let me tell you something. I want to connect with the locals, right? Because if there's an
Hmm.
emergency, who gonna get you out of there? It ain't. But anyway, but also, it's funny that you mentioned language because in Norway, you have to learn the language to have your for you to have a residency there. Um,
Hmm.
they're required. I had to take social studies and I had to take Norwegian language and pass it at a certain level,
Hmm.
and I'm grateful for that. It was difficult being an adult learner, and I wish I had
Yes.
learned a language much earlier. And I would encourage you, if
Hmm.
you guys heard her, if you have a 3-year-old and you can start getting them another language, even if you just download the app Duolingo, do it. Um,
Yes.
it is so
100%. I agree with that.
it is so
And I'd
Mhm,
also jump in to say, if you are someone with a young child and you're considering moving abroad, that's
mhm,
the best time to integrate your child.
mhm.
Children are like sponges. I
Yeah.
see so many people who move to Mexico, their
Mhm.
kids pick up Spanish quicker than adults. So I
Yes.
just want to encourage your listeners who may be moms, single moms,
Yeah.
moms and dads. That's a great time to move abroad with your child or
Absolutely.
even travel with your child.
Absolutely. Or even travel. And so I just wanted to hit that, but I also wanted to So yeah, so definitely the points you gave, they're excellent. I definitely think those points that you gave as far as language, right? Because it's in America, we say if you want to speak English, press a button. What do you mean? Like in America, right? And Norway, where I live, Norway would never do that. They'd be like, you're gonna speak Norwegian, and if you want another language, you're gonna have to ask for it, kind of thing, right?
Exactly.
And I can see the pros and cons to both, right? So definitely understanding the visa residency policies and things like that. Those things are important. The one thing I want to ask is about travel, right? Because sometimes, and for when we think of the number of Americans that one don't have passports, right,
Mm-hmm.
or have don't take their children abroad because of the
Mm-hmm.
myths and things like that. But also, there's one myth that's just basic: is that it's too expensive to have a passport and it's too expensive to travel.
To travel.
I want you to talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, absolutely. I think traveling is the best gift that you can offer someone. The younger, the better, because it allows them to see that maybe they're interested in becoming a global citizen of the world. And I feel like becoming a global citizen is your birthright. Just because you're born somewhere doesn't mean you have to stay, doesn't mean you have to leave, but it gives you the opportunity to know, you know what, there's such a big world out there. And I
Mhm,
think part of what happens when you have a passport, it's worth the investment because it unlocks a piece of you. So
mhm,
when you go to these places, you experience a different side of you.
mhm,
When you're continuously living and staying in the area you're in, you're recognizing that same version of yourself because
mhm.
you have the comforts of yourself. But when
Absolutely.
you move abroad, it gets uncomfortable. You
Yeah.
start seeing things, you start hearing things, you start eating things that you're not used to. And it pushes buttons, but it also expands you.
Yeah.
And that's the best part of life when we're able to experience growth. So
Absolutely.
I feel like that investment is so worth it. If you're a parent, if you're a young adult, I encourage traveling because again, it
Yes.
opens up a different version of yourself.
It really does. And you guys, it's really not that. There's so many ways to travel. Of course, you can do a luxurious trip, but there are other ways that you can travel that doesn't cost so much. If you're a teenager or a young adult, you can stay in a hostel, check out the
I
country
agree.
where you're going, but don't let money be the reason you don't experience something. Yeah. And so
And
definitely.
take advantage of the opportunities. I think a
Mm,
lot of people are doing house sitting, dog
mhm,
sitting. These are free opportunities, meaning if you're just able to manage the flight, you're able to go to this particular country and house sit. So that what that means is there are people who have homes in these particular countries. Maybe they're going on holiday somewhere and they
yeah.
want to make sure that their house is being tended to or their dogs are being tended to. This
Mhm,
is an opportunity to have a free stay in that country. So
mhm.
take advantage of what you can to travel because this is 2023. So there's so many more opportunities.
Mhm. See, I would have never thought of that. I think that's
Mhm.
absolutely amazing that you shared that, and that's something that if you guys want more information, definitely get in touch with her, right? Get in touch with Asha.
Yeah, for sure. And one other thing I would say, you talked about hostels. That's a great opportunity. Travel on the off season. Okay,
Mhm,
that's another opportunity to take
mhm.
advantage if money is a concern to you.
Yes.
And what I mean by the off season is people want to travel during, summer vacations,
Yeah.
or those are the ideal times. But
Yeah.
for me personally, I travel to places during rainy season
Yes.
because all that means is it may rain, it may not. It may
I
rain for 10 minutes, it may rain for an hour, and you
yeah.
still have this beautiful place. And
Yes.
most of the time, you have it to yourself. So it's
Yeah.
even better that
I
you don't
agree.
see 100,000 people on the beach with you or, at a tour site with you. So take advantage of that as well.
Yeah, I love that because one of the things Norwegians say is no such thing as bad weather, just bad
At all.
clothes. So
At
point
all.
being, I love traveling. I went to Disney World in the off season. My husband and I were in the back of the tram by ourselves. It was
I
so.
love it.
I love it. I so agree with that. I want to just talk about something fun. So I have to tell you, Mexican food is my favorite food. My favorite food. How have a feeling that we Americanized it, and I have a feeling also. I remember in Norway when I had a taco, they had put corn in it, and I had never had it. So every country does what they want. I want to hear about the cuisine there. What are some of the traditional meals, and how did you how do you experience that? And have you brought any of your American traditions there and merged them or fused them? Or I'd love to hear a little bit about that.
So yeah, for sure. I'm plant-based, so let me start with that. So
Okay.
I eat fish and I eat mainly vegetarian meals, and that has not stopped anything for me in Mexico. So
Yeah.
that's something else I will share. If you are vegetarian, this country
Mhm.
is very it's a great opportunity to have vegetarian food. You won't miss out.
Wow.
Now let's talk about the food. The food is fantastic. What I
Mm.
will say is, as I mentioned, there are many states here. So each state almost has their own cuisine and they're always in competition. We have the best mole here. We have the best this here. So it's so fun, like you
Yeah.
mentioned a little bit earlier, traveling around the country
Hmm.
because each state or city you go to, you're able to experience a different cuisine. Now,
Hmm.
in terms of the food, yes, Mexican food in the States is not Mexican food.
Yeah, I know.
Because the
Yeah.
sopes that I eat are delicious, the
Yeah.
gorditas,
Yeah.
even the drinks here, like the non-alcoholic drinks, the atole,
Yeah.
the holiday drinks, the ponche that they have. I mean, it's so rich in flavor. That's the biggest thing that I can say. Mexico does not lack for flavor.
Mm.
Everything is well flavored. It's
Mhm.
spicy if you like spicy. They definitely do spice here, but
Mhm.
everything is just so delicious and filling
Mhm.
and rich. Just
Making me want some authentic. I am in California, so I get very close to real authentic Mexican food. So
okay.
I tell you, I'm close. We get close to it sometimes, but and of course I've traveled. I've been traveling to Mexico since I was younger when my church started. But I want you to go ahead and finish that. How have you
Yeah.
brought? Yeah. Hmm.
Yeah, so what's nice is obviously there are other expats here. So
Hmm.
it's nice, like during the holidays, we kind of mix and mingle our traditions. So we bring like the soul food and you mix it with things. So maybe someone's cooking greens, maybe someone is doing the shredded chicken here. So it's blending the flavors together and seeing that, you know what, we do have things in common. So it's very interesting to play that balance. And what
Hmm.
I will say for your listeners too, if you are looking for some of the best Mexican cuisine, I would recommend you to check out states like Oaxaca. Oaxaca is known as, specifically
Hmm.
Oaxaca City is known to have some of the best food in Mexico. Check
Oh.
out another state called Puebla.
Hmm.
Puebla City, they're known for also having some of the best food. So if your listeners are interested in doing maybe like a foodie trip,
Oh, now, girl, now you got me right there. Foodie trip.
a foodie trip in Mexico is definitely worth it. So there are my recommendations.
Oh, that's amazing. Thank you for sharing.
Of
So, are you?
course.
Do you see a lot of products that are in America in Mexico? I have to say, in Norway, we have some, but because of a lot of the chemicals and things in ours, you don't get a lot of them approved for other countries. I'm curious about Mexico.
Very similar.
Hmm.
Very similar. So that's what I really love about here. Since I moved, the food, remember I said quality of life. One of
Hmm.
the things that was a quality of life indicator for me is food quality.
Hmm.
That was something that was very important to me. And I don't really feel like they have a lot of the ingredients that they have in the food in the States. So things
Hmm.
are much fresher here.
Yeah.
A lot of people, while you can still shop at supermarkets like you're accustomed to in the States, most people go to smaller stores here.
Hmm.
So you're getting the fresh produce, you're getting something that was delivered yesterday. So
Hmm.
I don't often see a lot of the stuff that's sold in the States unless you're going to the bigger box grocery stores. But I
Hmm.
mainly shop in the smaller stores because I like to support local.
Hmm.
That's
Good.
very important for your listeners as well. When they move abroad or you're traveling, try to support local.
Yeah, I agree. I love that. One of the things I noticed when I was abroad is that America comes up with African American, white American, this American, that American. But when we go abroad, I was American. They didn't have the subcategories.
Mhm.
How is it? Is that the same in Mexico, or do
Very
you?
much so.
Okay.
It's when they see you, they just look at you as American. You're someone here that is American. Now, sometimes for me, they may ask me, based on how I look, are you from Africa? Are you from Jamaica? Are you from Cuba? Because, so they may ask those questions because they just don't know. But typically, the first look is American, and it's not the breakdown. Oh, they're white American, or they're blue American, they're
Yeah.
yellow American. It's just that. I think that subcategorization is something that I've experienced mainly in the States. When I've traveled to Europe, it's the same thing.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
interesting too, and you're right, because even my husband, who was a much a darker tone than I am, they always thought he was African, and if we
Hmm.
speak, of course, they know,
Yes,
right?
of course, the tongue tells everything.
Yeah, but otherwise, even for me, they're like, "Oh, Portuguese, Brazilian," and it's amazing that when most people think of America, they do think of white American. So when they
Mhm.
see you, if you have not spoken, they do ask, based on what you look like, and so
Yeah.
don't be offended. I would
No.
what I'm saying is just, once you speak and say it, they're going to be like, oh, because remember, when we're out in the world, we're teaching them too. Because a lot of times I met people that had never met an African American. And
Hmm.
today we are lifelong friends. So and we have opportunities to teach them beyond what they see on TV of us, right? And I
Hmm.
think that's so, so important is that when you go over and Authenticate is about that. It's connecting. I see
Hmm.
you see me, and we know that the world is better when we play together. Uh,
Yeah. And I think pay attention to intention. I
yes.
think a lot of times when people look at us and they have questions in places where they've never seen us, we
Mhm.
automatically get on the defense because we
Yeah.
feel offended. But what
Mhm.
I realized, especially when you travel to small corners of the world, those really small towns, they
Mhm.
really have maybe never seen someone that looks like you.
That's
And
right.
that's not an offense to you. That's not saying that you're a terrible person. They dislike you. They just have never seen you.
Yes.
So it's really something to kind of think about based on your experiences. And that goes back to traveling. Those
Yeah.
are the type of experiences you just mentioned. You may meet someone who's never looked like you, and then you end up best friends.
Best friends.
You
Yeah.
end up communicating for the next 20 years. So you never
Yeah.
know what travel may bring you. So
Yes.
I encourage you highly to travel.
Yeah, stay curious, you guys, when you're
Mhm.
traveling. Know that they're trying to decode your culture and understand you as you're trying to decode and understand them and meet each other halfway. I
Yeah.
think that's really cool. And I can tell you, and we said it before, you will find us everywhere, but that doesn't mean just because we are everywhere that someone has interacted with it at someone from the African diaspora. So
Hmm.
I
And
think.
push yourself past your boundaries because
Mhm.
this has happened in Mexico. I meet a lot of clients
Mhm.
that want to move somewhere with an expat community, meaning people
Mhm.
who look like them. And
Mhm.
they're using that as a barometer for how their expat experience may be.
Mhm.
But just
Mhm.
because someone looks like you does not mean that you will
Mhm.
necessarily have great
Mhm.
experiences together.
Yeah.
So I encourage people to open your mind past
Mhm.
the bounds of meeting someone that looks exactly like you.
Exactly. I definitely say that. And I think some of the ways you can do that, even if you're traveling, if you're going to stay someplace over 10 days, or if you're studying, is find out what the locals are doing. Go to the movies. Be
Mhm.
uncomfortable sitting in a language
Yeah.
while you're learning it and
Mhm.
sounding dumb when you talk. Because I was in my 40s trying to say ABCs and things like that. And they say some of the educated people are the hardest adults to teach a second language because we don't like to sound uneducated. But I tell you,
Mhm.
push beyond that. But get in a networking group. If you like Zumba, go to a Zumba class. If you like
Yep,
skating, find skating. Do things with the locals. It will enrich and change your life forever. So,
I agree with that. And
mhm,
know that all of the same things you do at home are available elsewhere. If you enjoy playing tennis, if you enjoy knitting, there are the same groups that exist in other countries as they
mhm,
do in the country you are used to. And that's a great opportunity for you.
mhm. And if it doesn't exist, bring it there.
Create it.
So, how has living abroad enriched your life? Do you have children, by the way?
No, I don't.
No, okay, so how has I just wanted to include them, and so I didn't wanna exclude them, but how has it enriched your life and made you a better person?
Yeah, it's made me more human.
Mm,
It slowed me down. I think that prior to here, I lived in Washington, D.C. I had a 9 to 5. I hopped on the metro every morning. So that's our train system. You're just running this race. You get off, you run to the grocery store, you make food, and it's time to do it all over again.
start again.
That is the routine. And really, what I love about the culture here is that it's slower.
Mhm.
It's slower and people are more present, which has allowed me to be present. I think one thing that I've really grown is that people are not on their phone 24/7.
Mhm.
People are so much more present to experiencing things like hanging out in the parks, playing cards, doing things like that. And you don't realize how much that rat race contributes to anxiety.
Yeah.
So for me, it has really slowed me down. It has made me more present. It has allowed me to enjoy the day to day. It doesn't have to be a plan where it's like something big going on. I'm able to enjoy the day to day living abroad because everything is, I'm still so curious as I'm still a couple of years in this journey. So I'm
Okay.
still so curious. Everything is new. You know, the first 5 years, everything is still new.
Yeah.
So it's like you're still trying new foods, you're still going to new cultural festivals.
Mhm.
Everything is just keeping your eyes so big. And so
Yeah.
I'm really enjoying that.
That's good. That's really good to hear, and I'm glad that you're thriving there.
Thank you.
And yeah, definitely. I wanted to say something else, and of course, it slipped my mind. But if you had to say what your biggest lessons are, I know it's been 2 years, and one of the things I help people with when they move abroad is the culture shock, because
Mhm.
a culture shock is not negative. I mean,
Nope, not at all.
there is a human response to change, period, the
Hmm.
end. Whether it's
Hmm.
grief because of someone lost, whether it's
Hmm.
birth, whether it's marriage, whether it's divorce, whether it's school or graduating from school, there
Yep.
is a response. And so I want to hear the biggest lessons for you, because sometimes we are so intentional about our move, where to live, where to shop, where are the best schools, but we forget the human side,
Hmm.
right? And how do what do, when you're homesick? Because it does happen, especially
Hmm.
with family. Tell me some of the biggest lessons that you've learned since relocating.
So I think I like what you said because for me, culture shock is not negative. It
Mhm.
represents for me the awakening of my senses.
Amen.
I
There
think
you go. Yes.
that's really what culture shock means to me. So I'm seeing differently, I'm hearing differently, I'm touching differently, I'm smelling differently. That is what culture shock has been to me.
Hmm.
And then it's also decoding a lot of my behavior. As I said, you know, I lived in DC, I was born and raised in New York City. So I'm very used to fast paced, sometimes chaos. You know, a black woman staying in again DC, New York City. So a lot of my behaviors had me on the defense from my experiences with other people in the States. And this is really being real. This is a real moment. And I think that when I came to Mexico, many of us bring that. Many of us bring that defense, you know. And what I realized about moving here is overall the Mexican people, they're very friendly and they're very helpful and they love to engage with you.
Hmm.
But coming from my background, that's a bit of a culture shock because I'm ready to say, why you keep looking at me? Why you want
Hmm.
to talk to me?
Yeah. Yeah.
And that is a bit of a shock. And it's like, wait, I have to let my guard down. There's no poor intention here.
Yeah.
They see that I'm not from here. They're
Yeah.
telling me, let's engage in this event. Would you like to dance? Would you like to, you know?
Yeah.
So I had to realize that that was something really big that I had to
Yes.
realize coming from America.
I love that. I remember what I was going to say, and it ties
Oh,
into what you said now.
great.
Work-life balance. I have not visited a country that has, and I'm sure there's some out there probably in Asia too,
Yeah,
but
I think I know where you're
I
going.
have not seen a country as so many workaholics and just work over family. And I do think we're seeing changes in America post COVID.
Mhm.
But for example, in Norway, the first year on your job, you have 6 weeks vacation. You have holiday, right? Well, you could take holiday. A lot of people take off the month of July, and kids are prioritized. So if you have a kid, there's funds. I mean, it is a different mindset. And I will tell you that since repadding back to America, it's a struggle not to get in that rut again. It is a true
Mhm.
struggle, because that is the life. My husband really feels it because he really loved his job, and um, he really feels it. But I wanted to say that, and I also wanted to say something very key: research the culture before you move, because when I was in Norway, not knowing and not I could interpret things like, oh, these are cold, rude people. For example, queuing.
Mhm. Oh
Queuing.
yes, and your queuing is
You be ready to fight as a man. You be like, you don't see me. You're gonna push me. I mean, so I remember at the beginning, I'm like, square my arms up, take your arm off because y'all just rude. But it's not because I didn't research. I didn't know that part. You can forget queuing on and off a plane, get on, get off. It drove me batty until I took the time to understand and decode the culture and find myself in it. Right.
Very true. I understand queuing
Thank
and
you, indeed. Oh, I
they
remember.
queue for
Yeah.
everything.
Well, actually, Norway don't. No, we don't queue. Germany queues, but Norway does not queue.
The UK queues a lot.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
love
They.
tennis, and we would queue a lot at Wimbledon, and just
Okay.
in UK, it's,
Okay.
it's a
So
lot.
yeah. So let me speak for specifically for Norway. When the plane lands and you getting off, how we file out, there's like it's just rush of people. So much so I remember when we landed coming to America, someone said there is an order to getting off the plane, right? Because it was coming from Norway. And then on the way back, when we go back to Norway, we just know, forget it. We're not going to queue. Get in where you fit in, right? And they don't see it as rude. You just get up and take your space, and
Hmm.
understanding that because and not they don't in that country, they're not cold, but they don't say hi to strangers. They say the only people that talk to strangers are drunkards, people outside their mind, and Americans. And we do. And so, but I thought that was cold. But as I got into the local culture, I found out that's just who they are. And
Hmm.
once you get to know them, it's amazing. So do your research so you kind of know some of the basic stuff so that you
Yeah.
don't be yeah. So yeah. Yeah, I love Germany. I love queuing. I love the order. I love Lufthansa airline.
Yeah.
Everything.
Yeah.
So, what does success look like for expat dreamers in the future?
Yeah, for me, success looks like from expat dreamers continuing to encourage, particularly people who are not as familiar with travel, who have not lived abroad, really ingraining what it means to take those steps.
Yeah.
Because I really take joy in helping clients where this is their first time moving abroad and
Mhm.
walking them through the process. Because I think the joy to when they get to the other side, it feels so good. It's like I made the right decision. I
Yeah.
chose the right place to live. I did all the logistical steps and now I'm thriving. I'm
Yeah.
enjoying the fruit of my intentions that I
Yeah.
set.
Yes. I love that. I love that. And just to kind of, before I'm going to give you a chance to just leave a diamond with us, but I will say, in doing that and partnering with MexPat, just don't forget the human side because when you study and or live abroad and it's long term, you're kind of letting go of who you were and
Mhm.
becoming who you're going to become, right?
I
Because
agree.
you're taking in all this stuff, and that may cause you to question your sense of belonging and things like that. Get support. That's what Authenticate does. I'm sure MexPat may have something
Mhm.
around that, but take care of the whole person when you move abroad, and you will have a life transforming experience that will enrich your family for generations to come.
Yeah.
Yeah, Asha, do you have any final words or diamonds? I'd love you. I don't know if you have a quote or just something you want to leave with the listeners today.
Yeah, I mean, I really want to just say again what I said. I really encourage you to travel, to
Mhm,
think about a life abroad, because
mhm,
who you can become during this experience will completely amaze you.
mhm,
And I think you'll truly not only thank yourself for the experience, but you'll be able to enrich your family as well.
mhm,
Because
mhm.
the experiences that you're able to share and then bring your family along for the journey, even if it's a visit, it's just beyond what you could ever imagine.
Yes, love that. Thank you so much, you guys.
Yes,
Thanks,
thank you.
listeners. Yeah, your walk. Thanks for watching. All of her information will be down in the copy of this live event. Please, type your questions. We'll respond to them, and we sure hope to see you in Mexico one day. You're gonna see me. I'll definitely be back, but I'll
Okay, I
come
look forward to seeing you and your listeners in
and
Mexico.
that foodie trip. I'm gonna have to have you do that. But thank you so much.
Yes, thank
Wonderful.
you.